What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 81. We're finally back after a week-long hiatus. We hadn't had one for a couple weeks. So this week we got a good show for you, though. We got Clint McCoy on the phone from North American Whitetail. We've covered a couple of his articles in the past. He was a great guest. We had a good conversation. He's an Illinois guy, so that was cool. Then we got to talk to another guy from down close to our area. We talked about kind of his upbringing in hunting, how he got started, when he got started, all that stuff. We talked about some stuff that he's got going on now with North American Whitetail, some stuff he's looking forward to coming up. He's a veterinarian. He studied that at U of I, so real interesting guy. He had a lot of interesting insights on some things, so that was cool. We had a good conversation with him. Before we get into it, though, don't forget, if you guys want to support the podcast, about our sponsors. So if you're looking for your own piece of ground to manage and hunt and do some of the things that we talk about all the time on the podcast too, or if you're looking to sell ground, Rodney Hawkins is the guy to talk to. He grew up hunting and fishing in Southern Illinois, and now he's putting that love for the outdoors into selling recreational properties as a land specialist with Midwest Farm and Land. The MFL isn't your average real estate company. They've sold over $85 million worth of ground in 2022 alone. With agents like Rodney all over Illinois, they're really a local company with a national reach. For more info on them, you can contact Rodney directly at 618-925-3153, and he'll get you taken care of. He's also recently started a company called RHO Outdoors, and he's got hard and soft-sided blinds and blind chairs all from Radix Blinds. In addition to Camo Dust, which is an all-natural scent elimination product, he's got Byrna self-defense weapons, and he's got Tacticam cameras now. He's coming out with new stuff all the time, so if you want to keep up with him, anything he's got coming out or the products he has now, you can go to their Facebook page, RG Outdoors, email them at rgoutdoors@yahoo.com, or again, just call Rodney directly at 618-925-3153. Our other sponsor for the podcast, as you guys know, if you've been listening, is Grandpa Ray Outdoors. We've been working with them longer than any company at this point, and we're going to continue to do that as long as we can because we love their products. They specialize in providing the best nutrition for whitetail deer on your property, starting with the soil. They've got a full line of high-quality food plot seed and plant foods. They were started in 2015, but John, who runs the place, has actually been in the business since 1991. They've got over 14 different food plot blends to choose from, so no matter what you're looking for, you're not going to have any trouble finding it. Fall and spring blends, corn and beans, switchgrass, liquid fertilizer, soil test kits, you name it, they've pretty much got it when it comes to food plots. They're not just about selling their products, though. Their customer service is second to none. They'll answer any questions you have about what blends would be best for your specific property. That way you can achieve the best results possible. John and his team don't believe in a cookie-cutter approach to wildlife nutrition. They're going to treat you and your situation individually. They're not about a fancy label or package either. They're about good quality seed and taking care of their clients. Like I said, we've used their seeds on our own properties, on client properties for years now, and the results have always been as good as advertised no matter where we plant them. If we ever have any questions about what would work best where, we just contact John. He lets us know. It's always been, like I said, as good as advertised. So you can check them out at grandparayOutdoors.com and use the discount code RHO Podcast. That's all lowercase, no space, and you get 5% off your order, and that lets him know that you heard about him through the podcast, so that helps us out as well. Don't forget to follow us on social media, Ridge Hunter Outdoors on Facebook and Instagram. We've got a Facebook group now, RHO Podcast Patrons, for some exclusive content. We'll let you guys know, like, for example, this episode, we let you know that Clint McCoy was coming up, so if anybody has any questions specifically for the guests that we have, you can ask them in the comments, and then we'll ask them on the podcast as long as we see them in time. So also our website, Ridgehunteroutdoors.com. Anything you see on there, use the discount code RHOPOD. That's all caps, and you get 10% off the whole website, everything in your order. You can follow us on Apple Podcast and Spotify as well. Leave us reviews there. That helps us out. And then the YouTube channel, go subscribe to that, like and comment on any of the videos we got there. We got some exciting stuff coming up this fall that I kind of covered on the last Full Draw Friday episode. But we're excited to be back rolling. Got another good episode for you, like I said, with Clint McCoy. Here we are with episode number 81. This is the Ridge Hunter Outdoors podcast. All right, everybody, we got Clint McCoy here with us this week. If you want to, you guys can go back and listen to episode 16, where we covered his article on still hunting, and then episode 20, we covered one of his articles, I believe it was called The Winter Warrior. So, obviously, we've covered some of his stuff before, so I wanted to get him in here. Finally got in contact with you, Clint. But how you doing tonight, man? I'm glad you were able to come on.
I'm doing good, guys. Yeah, I appreciate you guys giving me the nod on those articles, man. I grew up family dairy farm down here in southeastern Illinois, and my dad wasn't a hunter. He didn't uh, he didn't think hunting was a big deal because it wasn't work. It wasn't work, being
Right.
on a dairy farm. And long and short of it, I just had to learn it all myself, and I started wanting to write for North American at a really early age because I'd looked to that for knowledge and learning. It was actually my first subscription I ever bought with my own money.
Yeah.
So
nothing wrong with that.
so I thought, and I wanted to like. So when I didn't have any money, I was poor. I'd sneak in with my mom to the grocery store and I'd try and read it all in one sitting. But
right.
depending on how much you needed. But yeah, I always kind of looked up to those guys on those old red label covers in the '90s. Like, I want to be one of those guys one of these days. I want to be one of them on the cover. And then later on, I was like, I don't want to be on the cover. I want to write for it every month.
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I met Gordon Whittington at a deer and turkey show, and he gave me my first assignment, and I told him I always wanted to write, and he was really gracious and kind, and he's been a great ambassador of the sport for many, many years, and the founder of that, or the upkeeper, that editor-in-chief of that magazine for so long. He's done a good job.
Yeah. So you're talking about going with your mom and getting as much free reading in as you can at the grocery store. About what age are you there? And I guess that's probably when it sparked the interest.
I am definitely 100% 13 years old then.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So were you interested in hunting before that, or you just started kind of seeing that stuff and that's what piqued your interest in hunting?
Well, really, how I got my start, I had some friends in high school that their dads were big hunters, and I become close friends with them, and they kind of showed me the ropes with 22s and such. And, that old guy let us go. He taught us gun safety and let us, really responsibly, and kind of let us go off on our own with a single shot 22. And that's how we learned. And, later on, I wanted to, just try and develop my skill set, but I was definitely 13 years old then for sure.
Okay, cool. It's amazing how many guys that we talk to on the podcast that are such big, like influencers, if you want to call them that, but they're big names in the whitetail world now, but they started on squirrels or rabbits, with dad or grandpa or somebody of theirs. That's all kind of where it all started. It's a pretty common thing, it seems like.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily have to be your dad. It can,
right.
Like the person that actually took me hunting, he was kind of like my older brother. I was the oldest of three, so I never had an older brother, and he was like 10 years older than me. So when he was 23, I'd have been 13, and he was involved in deer hunting down here in Illinois with the slug guns during firearm season, and he dabbled a little bit in archery, and he's the one that started taking me and got my first tags and such, and man, the first 2 years I didn't kill anything with that gun, and I'm like, I want to pick up archery because I can hunt for 3 months instead of like 7 days.
Right. Yep.
So that's where I got my start in archery, just the desire to do it more often, more frequently.
Do you remember what your first bow was?
My first bow was a hand-me-down Fred Bear Whitetail 2.
There you go.
Yeah, it had this weird cable system on it. And it was, and the wheels on it weren't cams; they were wheel bows,
Oh, yeah.
And they were the loudest, vibratingest, hard. And there's like 55 or 65% let off?
Probably 55. A lot of those were not very much.
They weren't much, and I can't remember. And this thing was too damn long for me, and it was just a beater, but it got me throwing arrows downrange. And then later on, I bought a Browning Mirage, or Tornado, I should say. And then after that, after a year or so with that, I was like, I want to be one of those Matthews guys. So I bought a Matthews Legacy when I was in college, and that's where it turned it off. I was like, this is it. We're into this archery thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you kill anything with that whitetail too?
No, I didn't. I didn't kill anything till I got better equipment.
Right,
The only thing I killed was time.
Yeah. Yep. So, what age were you when you killed your first deer?
Let's see. So I started when I was 13, and I was 16 when I shot my first deer.
Okay.
I shot it with a Winchester 1300 pump, like with a walnut checker and stock. It was my first shotgun I ever had,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just a smooth bore glossy finish bird gun, and we just put I think an improved cylinder or modified, I can't remember, for slugs. And if you could hit a pie plate at 50 yards, especially with that damn bird bead covering up half of the target,
Yeah, right.
then if you could hit a pie plate with that kind of equipment, you were considered quote unquote accurate.
Right. You were a damn near marksman at that point.
Oh yeah, but this little buck, he came down the ridge right in front of me, and I'd shimmied up this tree that was laying down like at a 45-degree angle. It had a great big crotch in the top of it, so I'm like, I think I could skinny up there and sit there.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, here come two little bucks toward nightfall, come down this big hill in front of me and in the timber and heading out to the field to feed. And I picked out the biggest one, which was a scrub buck 2-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But he was the biggest one of the two. The first one was a spike, and
Yeah.
I cut down on him and dropped him the first shot. And then nobody told me what to do after you shoot one and he drops in its tracks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I got 2 more shells. I throw 2 more into him.
Yeah, right.
And I didn't want him getting up and running away.
Right.
And I was jacked, man.
Yeah.
I was spazzing out.
Yeah.
And he was fluffing around. I just put 2 more into him, and my uncle comes over at dark, and he's like, "Man, what's all the shooting? You miss one?" And I'm like, "No, he's laying right over there." He's like, "Why'd you shoot him 2 more times in the guts for?" I was like, I don't know.
Insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I've always been that way. Like, bear down on him and make sure he's,
Yeah.
From word go, make sure he's dead, and make sure he's finished off.
For sure.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, you were 16, 17-ish at that point, you said?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
16 then.
And then I heard you talking on, I think it was the Exodus podcast, and maybe you even said it in the intro, and I just can't remember already. But you went to U of I for veterinary school. You said you were a vet. What led to that? Was it growing up on the dairy farm and being around animals so
100%.
much? Okay.
100%. Yeah, I still wanted to be involved in animal agriculture,
Mm-hmm.
but I wanted to have more financial means than maybe what my folks had growing up. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
I don't mean that in a bad way.
Oh, yeah.
They were hard-working, ass-busting, blue-collar people, but I always saw my mom worrying about, like, balancing the checkbook every time she made a transaction.
Right.
And I was like, I want to get a job where I'm still involved in animal ag and I don't have to balance the checkbook.
Right.
And
where you can work your butt off and it seems like it's worth it a little more financially, at least.
I've always been really fond of all animals. Like, it doesn't matter. Cattle, dogs and cats, pigs. Like, we was in 4-H for 10 years, all that stuff.
Mhm.
Like, I just loved every bit of them. We birthed our own 4-H pigs, and I was there for it. Like, man, this is cool stuff, and that's kind of what led me to wanting to go.
I think Nate has a soft spot in his heart for pigs.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I worked at a hog nursery for
buddy.
6 years, high school and college. That's what...
What were you doing? Needle teeth and vaccinating?
Vaccinating, yeah. We only had them for 6 weeks.
Okay.
We'd get them when they were fresh off weaning, like 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks old. We'd keep them for 6 weeks. They'd be 42, 44 pounds, and they'd ship out going to northern Missouri, anywhere in Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, South Dakota.
Who was the owner of the facility? Was it Mashoff's?
No, Brian Bennett owned the place.
Oh, really?
Yep. He's the only guy in this part of the world not Mashoff.
That's why I asked.
Yeah. And we would get those piglets from up there at that place south of Effingham, just on the east side of 45.
Oh, yeah. I know exactly where that's at.
Yep. So they would, we were the nursery for that sow farm.
I'll be.
So you went to college for veterinary school, and then at what point, like, obviously you said you kind of decided at some point, first of all, you wanted to be the guy on the cover of the magazine, and then you wanted to be the guy writing in the magazine. Where did you start deciding that you would kind of put the wheels into motion to actually do that?
I've always kept a journal. I think that's kind of where it started.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was the moment that the experience that I had that led me to wanting to write was my senior English teacher in high school, Mrs. Russell, who lets me hunt some really primo ground to hers.
Mm-hmm.
To this day, she taught us English, and she's a big influence because she started the day out every single day with 5 minutes in the journal. And sometimes she'd give you a small assignment. Sometimes she would let you just freestyle it. And she said, quote, anything goes. You can write any word, anything. There's no censorship in
Mm-hmm.
here whatsoever. And you're not going to get in trouble. I'm not going to tell your folks. I just want to read it and grade it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really eye-opening because then you could really experiment and, you could write without fear of judgment. And that really put a seed into me. Like, I kind of like doing this,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to cultivate that. So that's kind of where it started. Yeah. Mrs. Russell's English class, PHS, class of 97.
There you go. That's interesting that you say that because we talked a little bit before we got on here. I used to do a little bit of writing for newspapers and then online publications as well. But what got me into writing and eventually led to a full-time job for a little while was an English teacher that I had in high school that I'd say 90% of the people hated. Nate would have had her too.
Yep. Since you said that.
Yeah. She was hard.
You got to name her name. You got to name
Miss
her.
Campbell was her name. She was hardcore,
Yep.
Especially for lower classmen. So upperclassmen she liked a little bit better, which I understand at this point in my life. I do a little bit of coaching, and I get that. So she was like by the book, real hardcore, hard grading, but she was good at what she did. She was a really good teacher in my mind, and she made me a good writer, and I actually learned to enjoy it through that class. And so many people went through that class and just hated it, I think maybe because she was so good at her job. And she had pretty strict guidelines that she wanted to see, but it was because she wanted to see you become better at writing, I think. And that was kind of what led me to some of the opportunities I had. So it's kind of interesting that
it makes you feel good.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
it makes you feel like when they encourage, like, we all can look back at some of our educators and pick out, like, cherry pick them, right? Like the ones that really done it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can always go back and cherry pick the ones that you really despised or hated or didn't mesh with their style or whatever.
Right.
They were really, really anti or negative on you, but the ones in the middle you just forget.
Yep.
And the ones that are anti, the ones that were you didn't care for, they're on that end of the spectrum for whatever reason, but
right.
they're very few and far between. The ones that you really remember are the encouragers.
Mm-hmm.
100%.
Yep.
100%.
No doubt. So I think I heard you say on that as well. You've been writing for North American Whitetail now for roughly 6 years?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Okay, and you said you kind of got with Gordon Whittington at a show, and that's how you got your start. Did you seek him out, or how did that come about?
No, see, it was wild. So I have a stepson named Troy. I don't call him Step. He is my son, but he came into my life when he was 10, and he was wanting to get into the hunting thing, didn't know the first thing about it, never been to the woods before, and I just cultivated that into him and taught him from ground up, like bare bones. And he'd shot a few bucks his first 2 years, or he shot a few deer his first couple of seasons, and man, he got into archery and really just started tearing it up. And he shot a 2016 he shot a 205-inch non-typical gross.
Holy cow.
And we were targeting him. Like, I felt confident enough in his skill set as a 13-year-old that he could do it, and we were tag teaming him, and he not only shot him once, so he grunted, he sees the deer coming, grabs a grunt call, which I never would have done. I would be like, nope, you don't want to spook him.
Right.
He just sees him, trotting along in the little ditch in front of him, gonna come right to the base of the tree after the grunt, and he does, and he shoots him kind of low forward, hit him with one of these striker 4 blades, you know, and he runs around in behind the stand at like 25 yards, and he shoots him again, like and like quarters away and pinwheels him,
man.
And I'm like, he's telling me this, I'm freaking out, losing my mind, and he's telling me this. I'm like, let me get this straight. You grunted to the biggest deer we've ever chased together, and in your 3-year illustrious career,
right?
He came walking over to you, and at like 15 yards, you shot him once, and then he spun around behind the stand. You shot him quartered away, and it passed through him. He's like, "Yep, I think I feel pretty good about it." I'm like, "This is ridiculous."
Like it's that easy.
We go, yeah. No, he was jacked. He was spazzing out.
Yeah.
Worse than I was. But we go out to that cornfield where he took off to, and man, it was super right off the bat. And so we left him for the overnight. We did not want to push that deer whatsoever, and we went and found him the next morning. Yeah, it was awesome. And that's where I met Gordon. We took that deer to the show up there at the Illinois Deer and Turkey Classic when it was, I believe, in Peoria there.
Yeah.
And man, it's a great venue. I hope they get that back going again. It's an awesome show. But anyway, I met Gordon there because he came over and was looking at Troy's buck and talking to him, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Gordon. I've seen him on North American Whitetail TV, and I watched tons and tons of episodes of that, and I knew he's the editor-in-chief. So he asked Troy if they could do a big buck profile for their television show, and so Troy got interviewed by Gordon, and it was part of, did a big buck profile on that buck we call the main event. Man, he was a giant. I'll send you guys the link to it. And it was a lot of fun meeting him, and I talked to him there after he got done shooting. I'm like, hey, I'd really kind of like to try my hand at riding, and I told him I was a veterinarian by trade, and he said, you know what, that sounds pretty interesting, because I'm sure you know a lot of unique things about sciencey stuff, right? I'm like, yeah, I eat, sleep, and breathe it. And so that's kind of how we developed our relationship. He gave me just a small assignment at time 0 about soaking trail cameras for long durations, right? And that was my first article, and ain't looked back since.
Cool. You said you were kind of self-taught, I guess, and then like you didn't have what your son has now. I guess as obviously someone has been doing it as long as you have and have the experience that you do. What were some of the toughest lessons that you learned early on hunting whitetails?
Well, the first 2 years, very first one of the big lessons I learned is when I got a bow that fit me, I was deadly. When it fit me proper, and mom was great about that. She actually bought that for Christmas for me and took me to the pro shop down in Vincennes, Indiana, and it was a little shop guy run out of his kind of back 40, and he set me up with that Browning and dipped, like hand dipped and crested some fluorescent white arrows, like big aluminum, like Easton double X, like 2117s. We're talking like pieces of freaking rebar.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yep.
and it made me more accurate. I got a sight system for it and a proper rest, and I was off to the races then. And so that year I shot my first deer with it. It was really early October, or excuse me, late October, and nice cool morning. She come walking right by me, and that was it. I was hooked ever since, man.
Clint, so you said at 13 you kind of fell in love with the magazine, and you didn't have anybody really that you grew up with hunting until you started on your own. How much did you rely on the magazine that you now write for to try to teach you what you need to be doing?
It was probably my number one resource, legitimately, and I'm not just putting him over because I work for him. Like, between but it didn't have everything I wanted. It had a lot of stories about good deer hunts, but it didn't have a lot of things like, I mean, it did. It intermingles how to hunt and a successful hunt, you know? So I like that blend about that magazine because it's entertaining, or it was back in the day. Now everything's digital almost, but we're still in print, right? We're still doing it. But anyway, like, it didn't have everything I needed. So up at our little Palestine public library in a town of 1,400 people, I started checking out books on hunting and archery, and I read Fred Bear's Field Notes then, and I was like, dude, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, it really, like, when I've read a couple things with Fred Bear and the World of Archery, of course, it was like a 1978 copyright, you know, it showed a whole bunch of, you know, guys shooting bows that were top of the line that were way shittier than what I'm using right now.
Right.
But it was, you had to intermingle the two types of media. And another thing I started doing was, man, didn't you guys get hooked on these DVDs years ago?
Oh, for sure. Like VHS tapes and DVDs. I wore out Roger Ragland VHS tape that I had.
Man, I did too. I wore out the whole Primos Truth series when they stacked them in doubles. And man, they were like 3 hours a piece of nothing but killing. It wasn't shilling products or cutaways or fancy gaga.
Right.
It was laying the beat down on whitetails one after another without all the flim flam, right? And I'm like, I studied those. Like, so when I got into vet school is when I really started diving deep on those, because I was, you know, knee deep in anatomy. And so I'm studying these shot placements and tapes, and I sit down and start making hand notes about presentation and vertical location and pitch of the arrow, like if he's way out there at 45 or right in close at 10, you know, like just factor in all these things in and start thinking with a scientific mind. And that really helped me with those DVDs, man. It did.
Just being able to see other guys doing it and the results they're having. And then, like you said, with that anatomy background, that's a pretty good resource to know, okay, if this deer's at 30 yards and I hit him here from this angle, you know pretty much what you hit.
And or
didn't hit.
And probabilities of death and causes of death. There's death is not ubiquitous in cutting instruments versus projectiles fired from a weapon. It's different. So that anatomy is real, and physiology too has really helped me understand the process of putting one on the ground. That's a big, tremendous advantage.
Yeah, no doubt. I want to circle back to what you said about the equipment, and when you finally got the good equipment and how much more lethal you became. I think we've come so far with the archery equipment we have now that you can get, we'll call it budget equipment, and still be very accurate and very lethal. Where, like at a time when you started, 90s, early to mid to late 90s, even some of the early 2000s, some of the equipment out there that would be considered budget equipment was just like 2 steps up from what the Indians were using, you know. But that's really important. You look at pro athletes, for example, anybody that's a professional musicians, they have the best equipment for a reason, because that's what makes them how good they are. They have all this skill, but you can take all this skill and then a so-so piece of equipment, and you kind of have a ceiling. Now, if you have the best equipment and all this skill, then you've really expanded your horizons of what you can do. And that's not to say you got to buy a $1,500 bow every year that they come out. But I think just what you said about having the right equipment is really important.
Yeah, so I think having good equipment and finding your accuracy perpetuates the love of further shooting. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt.
Like when you're accurate and you're not fighting junk or improper fit or shitty arrows or anything like that, when you invest in quality gear, it's an investment in your own skills.
Yep.
Because the tolerance for error with perfectly tuned setup bows is small, you know,
Yeah.
like, but you know, doubling back to what you said about budget, you're right. You can kill deer with garage sale bows nowadays. You can, Troy's buck, the main event at Big Non-Typical, he shot it with one of those Bear compound RTH ready to hunt setups for a kid. It's actually for a kid or an adult. It can adjust the draw length from like 26, the minimum state draw length of 20 something, 26, 27 inches, all the way up to 30. And so I started him with that and worked his way up to like, and you know, proper draw length on him. But that was a budget bow. I think it cost us, I don't know, $325, $350.
Yeah, I mean,
and he killed a monster with it, dude.
Yeah.
Like
it's definitely
like he.
Yeah, it's definitely a different world than it was back in the 90s when it was everything was still pretty new as far as how far we've come on the equipment. But I just wanted to kind of go back to that because that is really important. Like you said, if you have everything right and you go out there with crap equipment and you shoot and you're only accurate 50%, even 75% of the time, you're still fighting that other 50, 25% and wondering what you're doing wrong when in all reality, it might just be the fact that you don't have an arrow rest that's worth a damn and it doesn't stay in the same spot all the time, or your arrow's not in the same spot all the time, and it gets frustrating and it causes you to not want to shoot as much, which you know as much as I do. The key to being good in the fall is shooting and shooting and shooting. That way you get that repetition in. Yeah,
that's correct. And you know, and muscle memory, you know, and muscle memory too. And I think an important point here to make is the tighter your tune, the tighter your group should be, right? Like when you get one dial down and you're flinging them all over Hell's Half Acre, do not start making a bunch of rest changes, sight changes, or any other bullshit. Put it up for the night. Go out in the morning when it's calm and cool and fling a couple when you're calm and see what your mind helps you do.
Yeah.
Because I get into a scenario where I have a big stressful day. It's every freaking day in the vet clinic. We're going like gangbusters, right? 25, 30 pages a day, 5 or 6 surgeries. We're grinding a piece. We're grinding, right? And so you get home from a busy work day and you're stressed out and you're tired and you haven't eaten supper yet, and then it's hotter than blazes in the summer, right? And it's just a shitty combination of stress and heat and poor visibility. Get up in the morning, start shooting when it's cooler and calmer before you have that stress of the work day, and I guarantee you'll be more confident in your setup and you won't need to move that rest.
Yeah, no doubt. It's kind of shifting gears a little bit again here. You mentioned that your teacher, Miss Russell, was that right?
Yeah, Mrs. Russell, yep. Yeah, so Mrs. Linda Russell.
So you're hunting some of her ground, I guess. And I thought I heard the Exodus guy say as well that you don't hunt any ground that you own or lease. So is that correct? So are you hunting all permission ground? You mixing in some public? What's that look like for you?
Yeah, it's like a 90-10 split, 90 private. And by private, I mean it's like, you could call it public private or private public. You know what I mean? Every farmer around here wants every deer dead.
Oh yeah.
And you know, it comes to reason that most farmers have dogs and cats and cattle and horses. And you know, when you're good to them and treat their animals right and don't overcharge them and stuff like that and be a normal, decent human being to them, they'll typically let you go hunt. And that's, I'm really fortunate with that. Like I have a ton of good relationships with my landowners, and we stay in contact all the time. You know, it tried to about every year, every other year, just make sure something hasn't changed. And we treat the ground good. Like we treat it like it's our own or even better.
Right.
And we pick up after ourselves, and we pick up stray trash no matter who left it. Like we do the things you're supposed to do, be a good sportsman, you know. And, you know, we don't poach, we don't use more tags than we should. Like,
Yep.
you just try to be on the up and up, and people will treat you good.
Yeah, you can definitely shoot yourself in the foot as a person who's hunting permission ground if you go in there and you're disrespectful to the ground or the animals or anything, because not only do all the farmers around want all the deer dead, all the farmers around talk at the restaurant in the morning. So if you
You're
go
right.
in there,
That's a good point.
if you drive across that field after 2 inches of rain and you
Yep.
leave 3-inch, 4-inch ruts across that guy's field,
That's a great point.
not only are you not hunting his ground anymore, but you're not hunting any ground around him anymore.
I have never thought of it that way, but that is a fantastic point.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying, that's the stuff you got to do. Just be a decent human being and be smart about it. But I actually hunt one of my better spots. One of the 2 spots I spend a lot of time at is permission ground as well. And I've had a relationship with the landowners long enough that it's almost, I'm basically the only guy hunting it. It's almost like I can do what I want, as long as I don't affect what they're doing. You can create a really good spot to kill mature deer on permission ground if you do things right. Even if you're limited on what you can do habitat wise, just being a smart 100%. Hunter. And
I have gone, so back in the day, we do have to be straightforward, we do have a small family farm here. Mm-hmm. My dad, dairy farmer, and of course grain farmer. You got to support those cows with a lot of corn silage. So, I think Dad farms maybe on a acres basis, like 800-900. Self-sustaining dairy farm. But we don't have a lot of timber. It's just not ideal. And I would really like one of these days to buy a little stretch off the old man here. And I live right beside the family farm on a place I bought years ago, and it just worked out really well. But I'd love to buy my own stretch right in here behind my house from my dad off the farm, and turn it into a 40-acre like legit ground up, because it's in alfalfa now.
Right.
And it's like towards its last year or 2 of production. I'd like to buy a 40 square right behind the house all the way back to the neighbor's wood line and do what I want.
Yeah.
And I'd love to do that.
Almost like a blank slate.
Yes.
Yep.
And you go in, you get a controlled burn plan, burn it, and then do what you want.
Yeah.
Like, whatever the hell you want to do. If I want to put a tree right there, I can do it.
Yep, exactly.
If I want to put a food plot over there, no one to tell you no.
Exactly. There's a lot of power in that, and you can, even like you said, even on a 40 acres, you can create really good habitat and have increase your chances at killing those mature bucks every year.
And I've already thought about it to this point. So you're going to, listeners are going to ask, well, how are you going to take it from the ground up and and be able to hunt it before you're 90? I'm 40, I'm 44.
Right.
And it's really simple. You plant nothing but bedding cover, like real world switchgrass, or that bedding in a bag they have. Right. And out here on the open sun, that stuff will grow like gangbusters, on the prairie. And so then you just bring in, a half a dozen or so oaks that you're going to have to pay for them now. You're going to have to pay for these bigger mature trees that can be planted.
Yep.
But you plant you can consult with somebody, plant an X amount of number of those and get them to as big as you can to get a tree stand in it within 3 or 4 years,
Yep.
Especially if you're using like a pin oak or something that grows really fast out in open sun, and you water the piss out of those bastards in the summertime and fertilize them and such. And that'd be how I would do it, is just put some key spots. It kind of rolls back here behind the house, and, just put it in some travel corridors and create. It'd be fun.
Oh, yeah.
So much fun.
No doubt. There's a lot you can do. We talk about small properties so much because we do some management work. And one of the best place that I hunt is just 10 acres. And it's, like you said, if you're butting up to timber, find what is least available in your neighborhood or your block, and then give the deer that on your property. If you only have so much ground to work with, find what they don't have and see if you can give them that. Give them a reason to be there more often.
Yeah, and you make a great point. You always, before you start making a bunch of management decisions, I think you're right on the nose with that, is you've got to figure out what your least common denominator for success is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you might be food heavy, you might be cover poor, you might be cover poor. You know, you're liable to have no water, or you're liable to have too much water, and if some bitch floods. You know, like lots of factors to throw in there. And to your point, you got to kind of know how aggressive your neighbors hunt. You got to know how and what they do for any kind of management, or if they do any at all. You know, there's a lot of factors there.
Yep. Yeah, that's a big one too that you don't think about a lot, is how your neighbors are hunting the property. I know Nate, kind of some of the hunting you do is based off of how some people hunt some timber close to you, and how they either
always too
do or do not hunt it well.
Yeah, it if you learn what they're doing and just see how the deer are reacting, you know, you can learn a lot just from that, and that can.
Now
really
you're being
help your
too
success.
modest here. You're being too modest. What you mean is you evaluate what you think they're doing right and what you think they're doing wrong, and you don't do that.
Right.
You know, and that's not being judgmental. I think it's good to, you know, I think it's good to free think on something like this, but I'm sure everybody sees me doing something stupid and they're making a bunch of assumptions like, why the hell's he doing that?
Yeah.
But whatever.
Yep. No, you're right though. If you know the neighbor has let's say a creek system that they could use in their timber, but they don't. They just choose to walk right across it, and they do that every time. And every time they walk through there, they bump deer. And the next closest bedding's on your property. You know, when you hear that truck door shut, that you better be ready, because those deer are probably coming, because your neighbor's walking right through them.
Literally, you just Johnny Carson, the Great Karnak one, that one for me, like predicted it what was in the envelope.
Yeah.
That is exactly what I'm going to try and do for this back 40 piece that I want. And if I'd love to have it, because I do the same thing, man. They access it with side-by-sides, and I'm not picking them apart. I'm not picking my neighbors apart. But they access it by side-by-side bunkhouse, and it's a nice big 300-plus acre property. They have access lanes all through the heart of the property, and they drive from the bunkhouse to the north, and the property extends all the way 300 acres to the south. And you know, some of the stands are in this massive creek bottom but right up against where I want. And it's got a great big deep creek basin, and I use that to slip in and out on them, always. It's like a subway tunnel. And those guys, I'll be in a tree, and again, I'm not busting on them, but they'll drive all their side-by-sides down the heart of the property, and barely before legal shooting light too, with the lights on, and they're stopping and dropping people off, and they're all walking it like it's quite the spectacle. And when they're walking in and it's right at daylight, let's just put it this way: shit can get pretty hairy pretty quick. Things are going to happen for you. And it might be helter skelter, but be on point.
Yeah, you got to be alert. You got that's what I said. If you can know what your neighbors are doing wrong, you can definitely capitalize on it.
Well, we're not going to call it wrong. What we perceive, because perception is everything. They could have a strategy in their mind too, and it may look wrong to me or you, and how our brain interprets it.
That strategy may just be, what's the easiest way I can get from point A to point B.
It might be, or it might be, hey, you know. So you got to be objective with that. You just be. I don't want to say critical, but critically thinking.
Yeah, no doubt. Yep, that's a good way to put it. So. You mentioned earlier you met Gordon Whittington at the Illinois Deer and Turkey, and that's a show that I want to say maybe they brought it back for last year or the year before.
I think it was this past year, yeah.
But we were looking for it. I was kind of looking for it for this year, and they didn't have it to my knowledge. But we're going to be at like the Deer and Beer Fest this fall. We always, the last few years, we tried to make it up to Iowa for that show.
That's a great show.
It
up
is.
there.
I mean,
that's phenomenal.
To me, it's one of the best, especially in the Midwest.
If any of your listeners out there are like diehard deer guys, right here in Illinois, and you've never been to that Iowa deer classic up there, make a pilgrimage. Go do it. It's really impressive.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was leading with this. Is of the shows that you've been to, what are kind of some of your favorites that you think people should go to? Obviously, the Iowa one, and then are you going to be at any coming up? Do you plan that stuff out, or is it just kind of, hey, I got this weekend free and the show's going on?
Yeah, it's really what it all boils down to. So I've got to work half day Saturdays. Saturday's a busy day for vet clinics, or at least ones that are still want to be open on Saturdays, which are very few and far between. But everybody's got a day off on Saturday, and everybody's got pets. It just makes business sense, right? Yep. Well, the show schedule revolves around my work schedule, because I don't want to take any vacation days other than for deer hunting or the wife.
Right.
That's it. That's what is getting my vacation days. It'll be deer hunting or the wife.
Sounds to me like you got your priorities in order.
She's first, because she's in the summer.
Right.
See, so my wife this is another great point I want to make. My wife is on board for this whole deer hunting thing. She's not one of these wives that hate it. And sees it as you using an excuse not to spend time watching crap on Netflix or whatever,
right.
That shit doesn't matter to me. Or to her, she's really cool about if it's 9 o'clock and I ask her, hey, can you go drop me off at the road? I need to go check 10 trail cameras before midnight. She'll go do it. She doesn't ask questions. She doesn't harp. But on the flip side, when turkey season is over in May, from that date until the 4th of July, it's wife season.
Yep.
Period. It's deer, DEAR season. Yes, deer.
Yes, deer.
Yes, deer.
Yep.
And we get along really good, man. We've been doing spring cleaning and stuff like that around here, and all kinds of stuff.
Yep. You got to get the honey-do list done outside of all the seasons.
Sure, and we take 10 days worth of vacation just for us two. We go travel somewhere, and might be big, might be small, but the rest of them, it's deer hunting.
Yeah, we actually had a conversation kind of about that on one of the episodes, and I don't remember which one it was now, but that just reminded me of it. We talked a lot about guys that don't have a ton of time. So say you work that 40-plus hour job, and you only have so many vacation days, you only get so many days off, going out there and hunting. So if you have to spend, let's say your weekend, you get spend a day with the wife and a day in the woods.
Yeah. You
can limit your time in the woods, but still sustain a decent level of opportunity at killing that mature buck by hunting the better days. And
100%.
Not only does it increase your chance of killing that buck, but you also get to still go out there, because on the days that are crap days, it's 70 degrees and low pressure and the wind's blowing 25 miles an hour. That's when you go home and spend time with the wife and do the honey-do list and all that stuff. So
that's right.
You can even do some of that stuff in the season and still kind of maximize your time in the woods. But that was interesting. That just made me think of that. We've had similar conversations before.
It's a great point. Last year I was on a giant, and I mean, stupid. And it got super hot the first week in November, and I just kept forcing a square peg into the round hole. I should have backed out of there and left that alone until those cold bluebird sky high pressure days come in. I should have been at home instead of putting pressure on him, because it was 80 degrees one day. You think he's going to get up and walk around in broad daylight then? No. He's hotter than hell.
Yep. He doesn't want to move, just like we don't want to move.
He's got his fur coat on, and all of he is literally that whitetail in the 1st of November is as big as he will be the entire calendar year. So he's fatter than a pig, and he's got his big hollow gray winter coat on. And it's not that red summer reflective light coat, right? It's that heavy duty gray that soaks up the gray and brown, soaks up the sun and keeps him warm, and it's hollow. Would you think you want to run around in a fat suit that's insulated?
Not happening.
No.
Nope.
Yeah, and I know that, but I couldn't force myself to not go. It was stupid because I pressured him off the piece and never shot him.
Mm-hmm. That's a big challenge I think for a lot of guys, which is why we talk about it. Is again, and it's a similar thing where if you do only have these certain days to hunt, and by God, this is my day off, I'm going to go hunt. Maybe don't hunt your best stand. You know, if you're just going to go hunt that day, if it's a bad day to be out there, maybe go hunt a different stand and wait for your next day off, and maybe it's going to be a better situation to go hunt that best stand.
Yeah, or freelance it. Like, grab a saddle and roll. Like, just go try something stupid.
Go hunt some public ground if you got some around. Yep.
Yeah, just go do something stupid. Stop over strategizing yourself out of giants.
Yep. Yeah, I think
sometimes you just got to give it a whirl.
Yeah. I think people would be surprised, and maybe they wouldn't be, the amount of giant deer that are, say, at the Iowa show that were shot by guys who were doing just that. Like, they didn't really have a plan. Now, there's a good number of them, don't get me wrong, that guys were on, and they had a specific plan and it all came together. But I'd say a good percentage of them are guys that, well, man, I was going out hunting that day, and I decided I'd try this, and Harry walked by, and I killed him, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I started doing some more of that freelance, just, let's go try something attitude, like 4 or 5 years ago. And like, it definitely made me better.
Yeah.
It makes you be able to see things better.
Yep.
And when you're hunting on the fly like that, like hanging and hunting with mobile set or doing doing a saddle or whatever, what I like about it is you haven't pre-hung that thing and you feel committed to that hard concrete spot. Like, man, I put all those steps up and sweat my ass off in the summer, and that sucker's going to stay there, right? If it's a good spot. And you put so much time and effort and you invest yourself in one spot, and then what do? You burn it up.
Yep.
You burn it up. It's natural. We all do it. Like, it's a good spot, then you burn the shit out of it in 3 years.
Yeah, if that long,
So that freelance deal, it's fun. It's freeing. It makes it more enjoyable, even though you're being tactical with your decision, smart with your decisions. You're not hunting wild.
Right.
But, hunt passively aggressive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, don't do something stupid.
Yeah. I think it does.
Yeah.
It keeps it a little more fun too and interesting and kind of a break from your normal pattern, because if you do get set into what you're doing and so locked in, you can burn yourself out even burning that stand out, even before you burn that stand out, maybe just driving yourself crazy thinking, man, this should be working. Why is it not working? I'm doing this. Go out and maybe change it up a little bit. It keeps it a little more interesting, gets you out there, keeps it more fun, which is what it should be.
Man, you're right. And like, so I shot that big wide buck wild side. I don't know if you guys have seen that video on my YouTube. But I shot, like 2 years ago, I shot the biggest archery buck of my life and self-filmed it. And he was a whopper. I'd worked on him for a couple of years, and finally he got, like, strangely, as he got older, he got more daylight active. Like, I noticed that in the summertime, like, he was coming out before everybody else.
Right.
And, like, to feed, I'm glassing him. And
how old was he, do you think?
I think he's either 6.5 or 7.5, but I'm not sure. I think he's 6.5 based off of. But that might be a stretch. He may be at big 5, but it just seemed like the older that he got, I think he's 6.5. Because I've seen him 2 years, and I figured him to be a 4 the first year. And anyway, he definitely had that strange pattern, and I started, like, being kind of, like, so committed to that stupid pattern of his. I was catching him in daylight on trail cameras super frequent in October even. Yeah. And I was so committed to that, well, he's daylight active deal, that I burned a couple of stands out. Long the short of it, I was so committed to this one ridge top. I knew it was close to his bedding cover along a ditch, a super heavy ditch, like power line right away, where it grows up thick in the middle, and it's got a little ditch run around it. I was so committed to that stupid spot. And after about the fourth day of it not working on some of the best deer days in the country that year, the November 3rd, 4th, 5th, somewhere around there,
Yep.
I was beating my freaking head against the wall. I was doing all dayers, and I knew my good weather window was starting to run out.
Right.
And then it warmed up to like 70 in the daytime, and I wanted to stay at home with the poopy pants mentality,
Yep.
like, to borrow a David Gogginsism.
Yep.
I don't know if you guys know him,
Oh, yeah.
but man,
For sure.
very inspiring stuff. But
Yep.
my wife, she was like, Clint, you're on vacation. You need to get your ass out there. It's like on the calendar, November 7th or 8th. It's the best day of the year.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I was thinking about staying home and pouting and taking my ball and going and sucking my thumb and laying down.
Right. Yep.
But no, my wife made me go. So I just picked this one random bullshit. Again, I'll be the first to tell you, it was pure luck that he was in there. I hung this stand with Troy before he even started hunting, my stepson, and he helped me hang it. It was one of those great big heavy ass black metal steps, the stick ladders, right?
Yep.
And we put another one on there to get it to 25 foot, and then we put one of those great big steel bottom platformed River's Edge sets, and man, we strapped it in there, and there it's set for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years by now, maybe 6. And of course, it wasn't trimmed out when I got there. It was a damn mess. I had to use my tow rope and tie my handsaw on the end of the tow rope and use it to I'd flip the tow rope over a limb, and I'd climb down, and then I'd tie it off with a zip tie and trying to create some space.
Right.
And so it's hotter than hell, and I'm sweating my ass off and filming all this. Some guy drives down the highway with a hot rod doing about 190. You can hear it on the video, and it is hilarious. And I'm like, this is such bullshit. Nothing's going to work. And lo and behold, it's like 65 degrees, and whoop, here he comes.
Yeah, and that's the day.
Yeah, broad daylight, and he goes out, checks the doe bedding area. That's why I was there. That's why we put that stand there years ago. It's right on a little confluence of a creek bed and a little tiny low-hanging thumb of a creek basin, and they get in there and lay in the low spots during the day. And man, it's a hell of a doe run. And he walked through the wild side, walked through there about 3 o'clock, broad daylight, hotter than hell, and he checked that doe bedding area, went out in an open field and circled downwind to it, and him and a little buck joined up together, and they were walking a trail right underneath me at 9 steps.
Can't beat that.
And I filmed him the whole way in. I stopped him in the best hole I had, and I laced him. It was unbelievable.
That's awesome.
Laced him at 9 steps, and he fell in 40.
That's perfect.
And of course I spazzed out afterwards.
How could you not?
But that move, that meant, going back to that, my wife had to push me out of the house and get out of my piss poor attitude and go, and look what happened.
Yep.
Just go.
Yeah, no doubt. Hey, you mentioned your YouTube channel there, and this is kind of the last thing we'll hit, and then I'll get you out of here. But I heard you mention that maybe you're going to be doing some stuff with North American Whitetail TV this fall. So can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah. So Haynes Shelton, who's now the editor-in-chief for the magazine, of course, they have North American Whitetail TV, and it's one of the longest-running episodic television series. And it's really something to hang their hat on as far as the brand goes. And I've always supported the brand again since I was, a kid.
Right.
And so when he reached out and said, hey, we're going to change some things on the TV side. Would you be interested in maybe doing some TV hunts with us? And I was like, what's the catch?
Right.
He's like, nothing. Like, where do you want to go? And I'm like, are you ribbing me right now? I don't know. I never thought myself as a TV hunter, but anyway, so I think I'm definitely going to take him up on that offer. And this year we're going to start, Probably go down to Kentucky since it's pretty close to home here in their September early season, and try to get in with probably a guide or an outfitter down there. Probably. I've always traditionally been a do-it-yourself guy, but I can't pass this opportunity up. Being I want to see. It's not the bucks of its quality and size that I want to harvest, really.
Mm-hmm.
I've had my fill of that here at home, which is great.
Right.
But what I really want to get into is shooting a whitetail in diverse habitat, and going out of my comfort zone a bit. And if it takes a guide service or an outfitter, I would like that actually. It would. I would be able to see more of the whitetails home range than just the Midwest,
Yep, no doubt.
And I really want to do that because I love learning about them things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same. Hey, I'll tell you, I've known you for all of about an hour and a half now altogether. I think you'll do awesome on the TV. I mean, for the TV show, I think it'll be great. I
hope so. I don't know. I never looked at myself that way, but I'm just a regular guy doing deer hunting things.
Hey, people want that, man. There's an appetite for that for sure. I think you'll do.
I think
it'll be awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing some of that stuff and then checking out your YouTube channel as well, which is where I'll lead into anything you want to plug right now. Tell the people where they can find you, your YouTube channel, social medias, anything like that. Any articles you got coming up that you want them to look out for. Anything you want to plug, just go for it.
Oh, well, not to sound like a commercial, but subscribe to North American Whitetail for real. If you want to get a quality content, and they have it in digital and print form now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like literally $12 a year.
Yeah.
Right. You spend more than that getting shitty food at McDonald's.
Yeah.
Okay.
One time.
So you get a year's worth of good whitetail knowledge. It's the best bargain in the business as far as I'm concerned. That's no bull, but other than that, I have a small YouTube channel that I'm starting to create more content for, but it's called Deer Hunter DVM.
Okay.
I call it Deer Hunter DVM because I'm a deer hunter first and foremost and a veterinarian second.
Mm-hmm.
and in that order.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I hear you on that.
Yeah. So we go through, product reviews, and I put all my self-filmed hunts on there, and we self-film our turkey hunts too, and I just put them together myself on the desktop there, and it's just something I like to do, show the sport in a positive light, you know.
Yeah, we need more of that, so I think that's good. But hey, I really appreciate you making the time to come on. I really enjoyed it. I think it was a great conversation, and if you ever want to come back on, we'll reach out to you. You reach out to us. We'll have you on again. We are far from scared of return guests on this podcast.
Okay, yeah, I sure would, guys.
Yep, that's awesome, man. I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to reading more of your stuff in North American Whitetail coming up. But again, just thanks for coming on, man, and we will talk soon.
All right, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you.
Yep, see you, Clint.
Bye.